Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and where we support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. I am Rev Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you have joined us this week. Today we join in a very long history of celebrating the return to life that happens each spring. All over the world and since ancient times, people have rejoiced in the reawakening of the earth and the end to the long, cold, and dark winter. The springtime celebration meant the ancient people no longer needed to store and ration food. There were celebrations and feasts. Some people say that the word Easter comes from the name of a goddess, Oestra or Ostara. Oestra is the goddess of the spring and the dawn. The Christian church grafted their own stories onto these ancient rituals. The story of Jesus' death and resurrection are told at this time of year. Jesus was a wise and brave teacher. He gathered people together in religious community and to work for justice and peace. Some people call him the Prince of Peace. But those in power didn't like that. They wanted to hold on to their power and money and sense that some people are better than other people. And so they put him on a cross to die. His followers were so incredibly sad, and they took him down off the cross and put him in a tomb and mourned him. But when they went back to anoint his body with oil, they saw that he was no longer there. Some people celebrate that Jesus rose from the dead, a resurrection. Some people celebrate that Jesus' teachings live on, even after his death, a different interpretation of resurrection. And so when we talk about resurrection at Easter time, we are combining traditions, as religion often does, by talking about Jesus' story and also the resurrection of the earth. We use the symbol of the cross, but also symbols like eggs and rabbits, which represent new life. And we think about our own lives too. We think about our own hearts and what has become hard and stone-like there, or what makes us sad and lonely and scared. We wonder what might bring hope and joy back into our lives as we enter fully into the season of spring. So Easter is a time that mixes grieving with gladness, that mixes earth-centered traditions with Christian ones, that mixes doubt that things can ever change for us, with the hopeful signs of new life springing up all around us. I am so glad that you've joined us this morning. We have not been able to be together on Easter for 2 years now because of the pandemic. So something that is making my heart glad after a time of sadness is looking out and seeing all of you. And also thinking about all of you joining us from home via our live stream. We are so glad that you are here too. And Sheila Ryan, I think that you are watching this morning. So I wanted to let you know that we have not forgotten the Provincetown UU Meetinghouse tradition of wearing Easter bonnets. There are quite a few magnificent bonnets here this morning, and I'm wearing mine in honor of you because I know that this was such an important tradition to you. So welcome, Sheila, from home. Welcome again to everyone, both in the room and at home. We are so happy to be spending Easter morning with you. And at this time, I invite Jen to light our chalice for us. And as we light our chalice here in the Meetinghouse, I invite all of you joining us online to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected even as we are apart.
Chalice lighting for holy days on which we recall the old stories, by Dillman Baker Sorrells. Holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and the strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is stronger than death, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be taught together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for the future, and to be alive in our present.
Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. If you have a joy or a sorrow on your heart this morning, you're welcome to light a silent candle during the prayer or at any time during the service at the table to the right of the pulpit. And there is a journal there to record your thoughts and prayers. Spirit of life, be with us this morning with all that we carry. Joys and sorrows, hopes and doubts, accomplishments and failures. Be with us as we open our hearts to the joy of Easter and to the hope that this season brings. Spirit of new life, help us to welcome the blooming of spring into our lives. Help us to welcome new beginnings, risks, and the unknown. Spirit of compassion, help us to be gentle with each other and with ourselves. Help us to forgive and to love more deeply. Spirit of memory, be with us as we hold dearly thoughts of those who are no longer with us. Help us to heal from our many losses and to balance remembering with letting go. Spirit of resurrection, be with us as we roll back the stones of fear, hatred, and indifference to welcome a world of peace. Help us to work for tolerance, justice, and solidarity. Spirit of community, be with us this Easter morning as we worship together in honor of stories of rebirth and in celebration of renewed life. Amen, and blessed be. You might have noticed that around Easter time you'll see a lot of eggs around. Maybe you've decorated some eggs yourself this week, or maybe you've found some chocolate eggs in your Easter basket this morning. Why is that? Well, the egg is a symbol of renewed life. Out of this cold, hard, seemingly lifeless shell, a little baby chick can be born. It's magical. And so we use the symbol of the egg to celebrate the joy of birth and new life. And it matches what is happening all around us as the earth comes back to life, with plants pushing up through the bare soil and leaves emerging on trees. It echoes that story of Jesus leaving the empty tomb behind, just like the chick leaves behind the eggshell and goes out into the world. And so that is why we have Easter egg hunts. We look for that joyful symbol. And so I invite everyone here today, children and adults, to look for some eggs out in our yard after the service that we have hidden for you. And if there are any young adults here, I've hidden some green eggs just for you, teenagers and young adults. They're extra difficult. I thought you could use that challenge. But please, everyone join us on the lawn after the service. It will be really fun. But this morning, my friend Ellen and I want to tell you a little bit about some eggs that aren't filled with chocolate and toys, but that are very special. They are Ukrainian Easter eggs that are painted in a very special way that Ellen is going to tell you about in a minute. But first I wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of these eggs. They're called pizanka, and they date back thousands and thousands of years, even before Jesus was born. It was a tradition in the Slavic and Eastern European and Mediterranean regions to decorate eggs with symbols that celebrated nature's rebirth. And people, especially women, would spend hours and hours and hours carefully decorating these eggs with special messages on them. Not words, but symbols. Different symbols for different things on life's journey. And they were thought to offer blessings and protection when you gave them to someone else. And so people would give these beautiful eggs to family members and to friends, and even to someone they had a crush on, to tell them that they really liked them. Now, when Christianity came around, the Christian church folded this ancient egg decorating tradition into its own stories and rituals. People began using the season of Lent, leading up to Easter, to decorate the eggs. And they would bring them to the church to be blessed. Some of the ancient symbols, like the cross, were also Christian symbols. And so they came to have new meanings Now, in Ukraine in the 20th century, religion was repressed by those in power, and people had to be kind of secret about their faith. Pysanka was forbidden, and many eggs were destroyed, even the ones in museums. But people, especially in the small villages of western Ukraine, continued to paint the eggs in secret and kept the old ways alive. Nowadays, you will find pysanka in every Ukrainian home at Easter time. And now this year at Easter time, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. So I don't think that many people have been able to spend hours and hours painting eggs. But we hope that they are finding little ways to celebrate Easter, even during this very sad and scary time. And we think about the Ukrainian people this morning and all of the people all over the world who might be scared or facing violence or war. And we send them our messages of hope and love, not on eggs, but through our prayers, and also the money and the resources that we continue to send to them. And we honor their culture and tradition by learning more about it this morning. So, Ellen, will you tell us a little bit more about pysanka?
Set up here. Pysanka is partly the art of arranging things on an egg. So, how to make a Ukrainian egg? I learned from Luba Perchich in northeast Minneapolis in 1973. I'm remembering her now. She died in 2020. Ukrainian eggs is the art of dyeing and then wax resisting the egg. So it's like batik, that process of coloring and coloring and coloring, and after each coloring, laying on wax which will resist. So you're preserving the color you just put on. One of the beautiful things about pysanka is that you use beeswax. So besides the fact that it's a mystical, sacred process, it smells great. It involves a candle, so there are a few precautions. It also involves real raw eggs. Eggs roll and go splat. You need a steady hand and a lot of concentration. Because of the candle, you need to watch where you're reaching as you go through this process. It's an excellent way to nurture attention. So as I said, it's a process of coloring and coloring and coloring. You want to start with the brightest color first. So as with the egg that Kate showed us, if you want part of your egg to be white, you would use this stick called a pysanka, which is a little wooden stick with a copper funnel. You scrape a bit of the beeswax into the funnel, hold it over a candle flame, let the wax melt out through this tiny tip onto the egg. So if you want part of your egg white, you would cover that with wax right away. Then you'd go into the first dye bath, your brightest color, maybe yellow. Pull the egg out very carefully and cover whatever you want yellow. maybe petals of a flower. And successively through all the dye baths till the very darkest black, so that the egg at the end is dark and the other colors come out brilliantly. After the final black bath, you take the egg out of the dye and wipe off all that wax, revealing what you've made. So there's surprises all along. Rev Kate mentioned about the symbols of. So here are a few. A simple circle representing completeness, continuity, and the cyclical nature of the universe. There's a, as you'll see, rather difficult pattern called 40 triangles. Triangle representing air, fire, and water, or the Holy Trinity. One of the magical things about an egg is even all the straight lines you make can't be straight. It's kind of lucky. Because when you put a straight line on an egg, it bends. One of my favorite line symbols is this pattern called Gypsy Roads Meander. It's a continuous route so that evil is unable to find its way off the egg. So whoever you're giving the egg to, no harm can come to that person. What a gift. Symbol called trees for strength and growth. The symbol of the ladder, rising above the petty problems of life. And finally, a spiral, conveying the ongoing mystery of life and death. Thank you, Reverend Kate, for the opportunity to speak about something that I love.
Thank you, Ellen. Now I invite Jen to give our reading.
Reading Late March by Richard Schiffner. Again, the trees remembered to make leaves. In the forest of their recollection, many birds returned, singing. They sang, because they forgave themselves the winter and all that remained still bitter. Yet it was early spring, when the days were touch and go, and the late snow could nip a shoot or freeze a fledgling in its nest. And where would we be then? But that's not the point. Do you think the magpie doesn't know that its chicks are at risk? Or the peach trees, their two frail blossoms, the new awakened bees, all that is incipient within us? We know, but we can't help ourselves, any more than they can, any more than the earth can stop hurtling through the night of its own absence. Must be something in the sap, the blood, a force like gravity, a trick called memory. You named it, or leave it nameless, that's better. How something returns and keeps on returning through a gap, through a dimensional gate, through a tear in the veil. And there it is again, another spring, to woo loss into song.
Thank you.
Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection, we welcome your donations here in the sanctuary or online through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website, uumh.org. On and off site, your offerings will now be gratefully received. Have you noticed that Easter moves around a lot? Sometimes it's in March, sometimes it's in April. Sometimes when it's early, there's really nowhere to hide Easter eggs because nothing has bloomed yet. It's just all brown earth and bare branches, and the grass isn't even really green. But then there are years like this year when Easter is on the later side and there are loads of good places to camouflage the colorful eggs, the reminders of life returning. This is because Jesus' death occurred just after Passover, and the date of Passover in the Jewish tradition is determined by a lunar calendar. Early followers of Jesus wanted the remembrance of his death and resurrection to happen after Passover every year, so a lunar calendar is used to determine the date of Easter as well. Easter happens on the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or after the spring equinox. You got that? Now, because Easter moves around, it occasionally falls on my birthday. Does this happen to anyone else? Any spring babies? Yeah. When I was 8 years old, my birthday was the day after Easter, and so my cousin Robin made me an awesome cake shaped like an Easter basket. And it had green coconut grass in the middle, and it was filled with jelly beans that looked like little tiny eggs. I loved that cake. So last year, when Easter happened to fall on my birthday, I asked Lisa to make me an Easter basket cake, just like the one that I had when I was little. I was very specific about what kind of jelly beans I wanted in the middle. Not the big ones, but the really good tiny Jelly Belly ones, the ones with the awesome flavors and colors. It was an amazing Easter day. We had online church and Zoom coffee hour in the morning. And then my whole family came over for lunch. My mom, my dad, my sister and brother-in-law, niece and nephew. Now this was still in the middle of the pandemic, when we were trying not to gather with other people inside. So we all bundled up and ate lunch on our screened-in porch. And it was cold, but we muddled through, okay? And the reward was that awesome cake with the coconut grass in the middle. And when we cut the first slice, all the jelly beans came cascading out, and it was so much fun. I put a picture of me and my cake on Facebook that day, right next to the picture of 8-year-old me and the original cake. Sure did capture how time goes by. Then we went out into the yard where the sun was shining and it was warm in the sun, and we dyed Easter eggs on the lawn. It was a perfect day. I look back on the pictures of that day and I was smiling so big in all of them. A perfect day. The next day was a regular day, not Easter, not my birthday. But that afternoon, something really strange happened. My face started to contort, and then it froze like that, and I couldn't really speak. We didn't know what was happening, and it was pretty scary. And I ended up in the emergency room at Cape Cod Hospital. And it was COVID, so Lisa couldn't come in, and it was just me writing little notes to the doctors because I couldn't speak with my frozen face. And eventually, quite late at night, my face relaxed enough for the hospital to release me, and though it was still a mystery what had happened, Lisa was waiting in the dark parking lot, and we made our way home. And the next day, it happened again, although less dramatically this time, and just half of my face. I could still talk, but sometimes my face would spasm, and it was a very strange and scary sensation. And we worried a lot about what could be causing it. We worried actually that it was a brain tumor, and we battled the insurance company to get an MRI done quickly. As some of you will remember, I took a month off of work at that time, and I met with a lot of specialists. It turned out not to be anything life-threatening, but not anything curable either. I still get those spasms in half my face, and the accompanying headaches and exhaustion. Sometimes my eye closes uncontrollably or my mouth pulls up, distorting my expressions. I go to see lots of doctors in Boston now, and I manage the condition with Botox injections, mouth guards, special pink light filtering glasses, lots of rest, and a special diet. I'm okay, but my life has changed. In the last year, I've had to reassess all of my ideas about what strength is, what beauty is, what normal is, what a perfect day is. I'm not the same person that I was last Easter in that photograph. Now, I tell you this not so that you will feel sorry for me. This congregation has been amazing. My family and friends have been amazing. I have great doctors and good insurance. I am fine, and I will be okay. But there were days that I didn't know that yet. And maybe there are days that you don't know that yet, that you will be okay. I tell you my story not because it is special, but because perhaps this has happened to you too. Not the facial spasms, probably, but maybe another illness, a pandemic, maybe the death of a loved one, a miscarriage, maybe the loss of a job, a breakup, needing to move a loved one into a nursing home. Maybe you're struggling with addiction or shame or bullying or depression. Maybe you look at pictures of yourself from a year ago and you are not the same person either. Our experiences change us. In his poem, Fault Line, Reverend Robert Walsh wrote, "Did you ever think there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room? A place in which your life is lived in meeting and separating, wondering and telling, unaware that just beneath you is the unseen scene of great plates that strain through time, and that your life, already spilling over the brim, could be invaded, sent off in a new direction, turned aside by forces you were warned about but not prepared for. Shelves could be spilled out, the level floor set at an angle in a some seconds shaking." Our lives are like that. They can change in an instant. A diagnosis, an accident, a mistake, a choice, a loss. But the healing, the rebuilding, the return to life, that work is slower. That work takes time. Poets often write about flowers bursting out of the ground, Boulez writes, bursting out on branches triumphantly, full of life and color. But they don't burst, not really. They spent months storing up energy and then waited patiently, enduring the cold and the hard soil, constantly watching for signs. The rise in temperature, the softening of the earth. What we see as bursts is the culmination of hard, relentless, unseen movements. Tiny growth, one day at a time. Resurrection can be like that. Not dramatic, not marked by a cracked open shell or an empty tomb, but tiny growth, one day at a time. And I don't want you to underestimate the importance of those signs, those messages that we look for and count on as we wait in the dark soil. Sometimes they come from nature. My vegetable garden was so important to me this past year, let me tell you. Planting seeds and watching them grow against all the odds, it was healing for me. Or maybe just thinking about something outside of myself was what was healing. Sometimes the signs and messages come from other people. I joined a Facebook support group of other people with my condition, hemifacial spasm, and their messages meant the world to me. And your messages of support and encouragement helped me too. And your patience, your love. When people in our life are having a hard time, it's so important to give them those little messages. Not to rush them through their healing, but just to say, I'm here for you, and you've got this. I think of those beautifully decorated hizanka and their messages of strength and blessing. How people have been giving them to each other for thousands and thousands of years. probably through some pretty hard times, I would imagine. I think of all the wishes and prayers that have been exchanged along with those eggs, and what strength people have drawn from them. I don't know if any of you noticed, on the cover of the New York Times this morning was a picture of children from eastern Ukraine painting Pysanka at a shelter for people displaced by war in Lviv. Can you imagine that? The hope required to do that right now? I came upon a Story People card the other day that I really liked. You know those ones I mean, with the kind of stick people with really colorful bodies and faces, kind of like cats. The card had this quote on the front. "Anyone can slay a dragon," she told me, "but try waking up every morning and loving the world all over again. That's what takes a real hero." And I just can't stop thinking about that card. Try waking up every morning and loving the world all over again. I think that's what Easter asks of us each year. To believe not in the resurrection necessarily, but in resurrection itself, the concept of it. The idea that we can return to life even when we weren't sure that we could. Even when we're not sure what it will look like. The bravery and commitment this asks of us very rarely requires slaying dragons. More often, it asks us to wake up again each day, to wait patiently, to grow slowly with hard, relentless, unseen movements, to continue reaching for the sun. We Unitarian Universalists don't always know what to do with Easter. We're not sure what we think of Jesus rising from the dead, so sometimes we just want to skip it. Call it something different, commercialize it. But in doing so, we miss one important miracle of the story. The miracle that life goes on, even after hardship, even after grief, even after earthquakes shake everything from the shelves and leave the floorboards slanted beneath us. Even after mistakes and lost time, after betrayal, loss, fear, despair, even after winter, even after death, life returns, is renewed. Bulbs lying dormant in the cold, hard earth all winter push through the frozen ground. Loved ones lost to us in this life return to us when a familiar scent or sight or feeling stirs their memory in our hearts. Leaders lost to us through devastating assassinations live on through their risen spirit, through their teachings. Hope, so long absent, returns quietly with the sun. Hard things happen. And then, somehow, we learn to love the world all over again. We hesitate about telling the story of Easter, but boy, do we need that miracle. We need that reminder that the story is not over, that the story of our lives is still being written with the daybreak of each morning. That new life, health, commitment, understanding, love, hope, energy and beginnings are not closed to us. That possibility is being born each day. Anyone can slay a dragon, but try waking up every morning and loving the world all over again. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be.